Good morning, good afternoon, wherever it is that you are in the world. Thank you for tuning in and watching us. We are off the cuff with T and me. I am T. That is me over there, also known as Carol. And this morning, we are talking about procrastination. Now, I know that none of you procrastinate, and you probably have never had that stress in your body of going up to the date that you might have as a, what am I looking for?
A due date,
Deadline, a
a
deadline,
deadline.
right?
Yeah.
A deadline. And how in the past, for me, procrastination was just sort of something I did. It was just sort of the norm. It was like, well, I know that I work the best under pressure. These are things that I had convinced myself of course, that I work best under pressure and I always meet my deadlines. So, it'll be fine. It'll be later. And then I find, that as the due date comes closer and closer and the deadline is looming, that the stress, the level of stress that's in my body is so intense and it's renting so much space in my mind and I'm obsessed by it, right? I wake up in the morning rigid thinking about it and I go to sleep rigid thinking about it. And yet I don't necessarily do anything about it in the past. And so this year in school, I found that I was deliberately creating new ways of doing things and getting things in several weeks ahead of time, ahead of the due date or the deadline, and then going, wow, this is an amazing feeling. I'm not stressed out leading up to the deadline. I'm done, way ahead of the game. And how much I realize how much damage I've done along the way because of procrastination, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, you name it. Procrastination is really dangerous, actually, in fact. And yet, many of us continue to procrastinate. Why do we do that? What do you think?
It's a strategy. I have been the queen of mañana. Tomorrow is always good. Tomorrow is always good.
It will be
Why
better
not?
tomorrow. Yeah.
Right? What did that Popeye cartoon I remember for as a kid? I'd gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today. I kind of feel like my whole life has been a bit of a Popeye cartoon. Um, yeah, procrastination is something I did a lot, and I did that really well in school. Really, really well in school. And I do that a lot around the house. And I do find that, like you, it rents so much space in my brain, my body. Like it's so consuming. It takes actually more energy to delay what I'm going to end up doing anyways, that I don't know why I don't just do it now. I know I'm not alone. Anybody else out there with yeah, like it's like
We're
knocking our
definitely
head
together
against
on
the
this.
wall.
And I've heard other people talk about it, so I know we're not alone, right?
Yeah, it's amazing. So it shows up. Obviously, school's a really great way when you've got a school and work. Those areas where we have deadlines and there's due dates and there's other people that are relying on us to have something else done. But what about procrastination when it comes to self-care?
Oh, that's such a good question because it's like, yes, tomorrow. I remember when I was a smoker, like every day I intended to quit smoking, right? This will be my last pack. This will be my last smoke. I really mean it this time. And then the next day waking up in absolute traction about, I can't give it up. I can't give it up. And yet, it was always the convincing of it'll be tomorrow. It'll be next week. It'll be next month. It'll be this birthday. It'll be, Christmas. Whatever that thing was. And then all of a sudden it was like, no, this became the most important thing.
Yeah.
And then it was a decision from there. And then for me, 20 years has passed by, right? Like all of a sudden 20 years has gone by. And that was one of the most important decisions that I made about self-care, about self-respect.
Yes.
But I didn't know it at the time. But prior to that, the build up to that was tomorrow. The next day, 3 years from now.
I 11 and a half years without smoking cigarettes as well. So I totally relate to that. That was something even my kids were like, she's never going to do it.
Oh, mine too.
I had given them a lot of evidence. I had tried to stop a lot of times. And I think that's what it comes down to is this commitment. It's that keeping my own word.
Right.
Like, I'm going to do this. I'm making a decision. I'm really clear about why I'm doing this. And I think that when I'm fuzzy about my why, or I'm not committed, when I'm half in and half out, I got 1 foot in and 1 foot out. What's the degree of success do we think is going to happen? Very different than if I am like, I am doing this. I am standing solid. I am grounded. I know this is what I'm doing. there's a different energy and feeling even in just saying those words. It
That's
felt
when
really different.
providence comes in, right? Providence
Yeah.
moves into the when I am fully committed to something, providence rearranges things so that it's supporting me. So the universal energy comes in and supports me in that decision. And it's interesting because I know technically there are other decisions that I could make that I could use that formula for, and yet
Mhm.
there's resistance. There's
Yes.
resistance for the level of care that I require. And if I was someone else, I would do anything and everything. I would move heaven and earth to make that happen for that person, right? But when it comes to self, it's like, I haven't paid enough prices and maybe I haven't earned it and all of these, simply crazy things that I've believed over time. And even as I'm
Well, they're
saying,
not crazy. They're just it's just how everybody has done it. It's status quo. It's just the way it has been.
and yet, like I said, when I'm saying it, I also hear this other voice of,
Yeah.
well, you could. And when's that going to happen? And what's it going to take, right?
Yeah. Well, and what you mentioned prices. So we do pay prices for procrastination. This can show up in our body. When Tanya started talking about this, talking about how it rents space in our energy. Like that is a negative kind of vibe, right? Like it feels ick. It's the ick factor. It's a low vibration. It can create sickness. It can create insomnia. It can create anxiety. It creates undue stress. There was
Cortisol, lots of cortisol shots, right?
so what is that, Tanya? So you've just recently you're learning about this. You've learned about this. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, my experience is it's trauma that's happened historically. It's a pattern that's happened historically. And until I become aware of those things that are driving the behavior, the need to deflect, the need to find all of the sudden that I need to clean my entire house when I should have been reading the messages or reading the posts or making a post or whatever the thing is, right? All of the sudden that dirt that's in the corner that's been there for 3 years is all of a sudden very important to do, right? And in the patterned responses, I'm trying to slow down for one, because trauma moves quickly. We move quickly in trauma. For me, it was like if I'm a moving target, no one can hurt me, right? And then realizing that as I slow down into the subtlety, the slowing down of everything, I can notice more things and care becomes easier. And for me in the past, it was always this big grandiose plan of, yeah, fill the rocket with jet fuel, rocket fuel, whatever, and let's go to the moon. And I would do that for a while, right? Straight course to the moon. The problem is that there was no plan afterwards or how to sustain it. So I would then plummet to the earth. And I kept doing that over and over and over again, and then internalizing this shame and hate for myself that I couldn't do it right. The problem is in that formula, there's no sustainability. So what I've learned this year in the tone of self-care is that slow and subtle care, consideration are all things that I bypass for the grandiose, but look at me, what I can do. And all the things that I proved that I could do short term, right? But it's the long game.
Right.
So how do I respect myself enough? And that means going in and undoing messages, right? The messages that I created in childhood that were not correct, but I lived as if they were. That I'm not good enough, I'm too big, I'm too much, there's something wrong with me, I'm worth less than others, right? These messages actually corrupted the way and my ability to actually be present with self and care for self and consider self equally as other. So I started over functioning to the degree where I actually hurt myself, and coming to realize that. And now, obviously, coming into the sadness, I think, of and the grieving of the way it has been. And instead of just off to the races and let's go and be really quick about my response, trying to be subtle and calm and do simple things, little shifts that are sustainable. And I am sustaining those things, right? Reading more, meditating more, breathing exercises, being embodied. That's something we quite often, we're not embodied, we live here. And it's quite different when we move from here into the body. And it's like, whoa. there's things here that are trying to get my attention that I've just been ignoring because there's a deadline or there's something I have to do over there.
Well, and I that's amazing. Like it's a lot. This is a lot to unpack in a really short video here. But um um oh, now I just lost where I was going to go with that. Taking things in smaller bites like this, making things a little bit more manageable. What you're kind of releasing a little bit of that steam, but what it's also doing is allowing us to live in that present moment. And so procrastination is one of these, like, anything but the present moment kinds of kinds of strategies, if you
True.
will.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking about what I have to do, because if I don't, then this is going to happen. And we're constantly thinking forward and backwards in this procrastination piece, which takes me out of the now. And so I'm ripping myself off out of so much. I'm missing out on so many things. It literally has run my life when I am in that place of procrastination. And hey, it's okay to date something and say, I'm going to do this later, and be committed to that and not let that rent space, if you're able to do that, to separate that stuff out. But being in the present moment is actually, I think, the key to, well, so many different things. But procrastination is one of these tools that really takes me out of the present moment. I just hadn't really considered that until I was just listening to what you were saying there. And because it takes us back to this trauma, it takes us back to these things that happen to us, the programming, whatever that is, it's taking me out of now.
Yeah. And how better would it be, or how different would it be for us to be actually present with one another or each other or ourselves and be in the now? Because it's fleeting, right? For me, I can become consciously aware. I can be consciously efforted towards just being in the now and being present. And then the patterned response is, oh, but, there's laundry to do. Oh, but, remember when you were 12, like all of those things also become present
Mhm.
and can take us off into something else. So, how do we practice being honorable about self, looking at due dates as, okay, so I have this much time. How much time do I need to spend doing this along the way so
Mhm.
that I'm not in the 24-hour crunch, like we quite commonly do in the
I
in the
remember,
visceralness of that, right? The visceral
yes.
experience of contraction and, oh my God, am I going to get this done? And then the relief in the relaxation of, woo, I did it. But the problem is we've done some damage along the way.
It's so funny. I remember a project that I was assigned. I was a department manager for a box store for a couple of years, and we were asked to put a business plan together for our departments. I was actually running 4 departments, but I put together two department business plans. And I had about 6 weeks or so, I think, to prepare for this. And it was like 11 o'clock the night before, and I hadn't started. And and it was school all over again. It's like, oh my gosh, here we go. This isn't something I can just wing. This isn't an exam I can just sit and write. This is something I actually need to create and put together. And so I slept that night. I got up at 4 o'clock that morning, and I put together these 2 business plans. A lot of that was, there was some mirroring. There were some commonalities because it was a box store. There was some overlap, but there was specific things for each of the departments that I was working on. And I was pretty proud of my slamming this together literally the morning of. And there was still this part of me that was like, I believe this lie that I work better under pressure, like you were,
Yes.
Tanya. Like,
Yes.
I if I back myself into a corner, I have no choice. I'll just get her done, because I'm not going to just drop the ball. I know that I won't drop the ball. But how effective was that? Now, if I had, and you know what, I knocked it out of the park. I actually knocked it out of the park so well that they wanted to take that template and use it as part of their whatever. But can you imagine if I'd actually applied myself and planned this and sat with it? Or maybe that is just how I operate. I don't know. Like, the jury's still out on that one, because I did. It wasn't somebody else had come in. It was literally written on a napkin. And I was like, okay, well, I'm ready. I'm fine. Maybe it was, I felt okay about it because of how I was comparing myself to
And
others. And
quite
that's
often
another
we
danger.
do.
That's
Yeah.
another conversation.
Yeah.
Anyways, as you were talking, I was brought back to that. Oh, that energy that took up inside of me for weeks without doing it, and how unproductive I was in everything else I was doing because that was renting space in my mind.
The stress of that is very
Crazy.
intense, right? It is crazy. And yet we do it. And it's
Yeah.
not uncommon for people to move towards these things like in resistance, complete resistance that it's the deadline or due date is coming, right? But it reminds me in you saying that how many times I give something 50%, 60%, and it's good enough.
It's good enough.
And I get it done and it opens to rave reviews, right?
Right?
Right? But
Ah,
I know
it's
that it's not my 100%. I know. And there's a lot of fear there, right? What if I gave it my 100%? And I am so fearful of actually doing that because what would it be like for me to have given it my everything? What would actually show up then? And then
wow.
this visceral feeling of overwhelm in the what is possible and what I'm doing are very far apart.
Oh my gosh. Absolutely. That's a brilliant point. And the possibilities. I've been spending a lot of time in meditation lately, and I've got this new imagery for infinite possibilities. The way that I see this now has absolutely transformed my life. So, oh, that's going to be another conversation too. So, here we are. We'll wrap this up for today, folks. Procrastination. Is it working for you?
Yeah. Does it
Like,
work?
does
Really?
it work?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell
Can
yourself
we
the truth.
I think that I would prefer my life a little bit less stressful around things like procrastination. I think that that would work better for me. Uh,
Well, and even before we tell ourselves the truth about that, at least be willing to question,
yeah,
right?
get curious.
Be in the question, be in the
Yeah,
curiosity. Is this actually something that benefits me? And is there a different way that I could do it that would be more beneficial and less stressful? Because who
yeah,
loves
and there might be wins in procrastination. I mean, there are wins in procrastination, right? We looking at that, examining that for each of us is different. So yeah, being curious. How does this serve me? How is this serving me? Where do I feel this in my body if I do it this way versus that way?
And
Um,
that's paying attention to the now, right?
yeah,
And embodying those things. Because quite
yeah.
often we just get cut off. Speaking of cut off, here's off the cuff with T and me.
It
Thanks
was
for
great.
yeah.
Yeah, great chat today,
Comment
guys.
below. Give us your questions. We'd love to talk about it with you.
Thanks, everyone.
Take good care.